I'm Dr. Roy Perlis, Editor-in-Chief of JAMA AI, and you're listening to JAMA AI Conversations. My guest today is Dr. Tanzeem Choudhury, who is a professor of computing and information sciences at Cornell Tech and the director of the Health Tech Hub at Cornell Tech's Jacobs Institute. From 2021 to 2023, she served as the Senior Vice President of Digital Health at Optum Labs, a part of United Health Group, and has also co-founded multiple health AI startups. Through all of these roles, she's worked at the intersection of wearable computing, AI, and health, all of which we'll talk about today. Dr. Choudhury, thanks for being here. I want to go way back to your time at the MIT Media Lab and maybe start there. How did you come to start working on health in the first place?
Thank you, Roy, for having me. I feel like as a psychiatrist, you get to the root of someone's origins right away. So
I didn't. Tell me about your childhood.
I know. It's like my academic childhood, right? So I think my experience at MIT has deeply influenced my work, and I would say in two ways particularly. It's a place where you tackled problems with innovative solutions and really didn't care about interdisciplinary boundaries. And I think that has deeply shaped the work that I did at the Media Lab and continue to do so in thinking about the problems in research I want to tackle and how do I bring ideas from different disciplines to solve that problem without being too focused on exactly which discipline I fall under. And I would say the other thing that Media Lab has deeply influenced me is in thinking about sharing ideas and communicating broadly to different individuals and different communities and people from the commercial sector to the research sector, people who work in technology, people who know nothing about technology but care about the problems. And I think that really shaped my entry into health and tech because the ability to think about problems from different perspectives and communicate solutions in a way that is meaningful to people who are using the technology has been very important throughout.
And why health? You work across disciplines. There are a lot of things you could do. How'd you land in healthcare?
I was always very deeply interested in how people behave, their different personalities, how they interact with each other. I came to the US from Bangladesh, like different cultures, but there is so much richness in who we are and our interaction and how it impacts our lives. So that's where I started, right? Really kind of bringing together most psychology and technology together. But I think one of the things that drew me to healthcare is we think about these behaviors and roles our behaviors, activities, interaction, environment play in our health way too late, right? When we are sick. And I saw the potential for how we can kind of go back a little bit before someone is sick to understand how we can think about the information that our lives provide and the outcomes of our health and well-being and how to design technology that could support well-being rather than coming to solve a person's illness problems.
So I know if I skip over this, people are going to go bananas trying to Google what you were doing in the Media Lab. So I'm going to ask specifically, maybe give us an example of this sort of thing that you were building there.
Yeah, so I started working on wearables before it was a common term. It was basically a bundle of sensors that were packaged together, people could carry around and wear. And my work was one of the earliest work that looked at how you can take these sensors and measure what people do in the wild, we call it, or in the real world outside of lab settings, and how it could be used to understand the dynamics of people better. And I was part of a group called Human Dynamics and really understanding the intersection of these bundle of sensors, which were things that would track your movement using accelerometer and gyroscopes, things that would understand how you are speaking to each other, not the words, just the tone of voice and your level of intonation and energy in your voice, and just understand how you are even, not just that you are taking steps, but oh, there's a little bit of kind of oomph to your step. You are more energetic, less energetic. And my work had looked at how we can first robustly measure that as people go about their daily lives, not in we bring you to the lab and say take 10 steps, but really you go about in the world and see, can we build technologies that are robust enough to track our behavior? And then to say when we come together, how do we influence each other's behavior? And my thesis looked at measuring the physical world social networks and understand you and I are talking. Are you having more of an influence on my style of talking or am I influencing your style of talking? And one of the things that we looked at is how people, when they come together, influence each other's style and behavior actually corresponds of their level of influence in the social network. So there is not only our own behavior that matters when we come together, how we intersect and influence each other's behavior also matter how we function in the real world and our social networks and our dynamics. And that was what my early work at the Media Lab was about.
I'm curious, this work goes back a ways. How come that isn't part of routine clinical care now? What's taking so long, I guess, would be the question.
Yeah, I think a couple of things I would say. One is this information is very rich, very dense, but we need to know how to act on this information, right? This information needs to be digestible and not just digestible, but you as a clinician need to be able to take action on that. And me as an individual need to be able to take action. So I think one of the things that we need to do better is take this vast amount of information and really tie it to action. The other is often thinking about clinical care and the technology and wearable sensor and sense the patient generated data that we create. How do they merge together to help in clinical decision making? And finally, of course, like how all these things get reimbursed or paid for, right? And I think we have these islands of solutions that are still somewhat fragmented. But we're, I think, in a great place now where we are seeing more integration of multimodal data into our clinical care. We are having new types of payments and reimbursement models, and technologists are really distilling this information to make them more actionable. So I'm optimistic that now is a great time where we'll see more and more integration into the standard of care. But I think before we evolve these solutions in somewhat of a siloed manner where it didn't help with the fragmentation in care. And I think that's something that really prevented clinicians and also individuals or patients taking action.
So you mentioned collecting data and not necessarily knowing what to do with it or how to present it. I know you've done some work in decision support and dashboards. How do you think about presenting this kind of information to physicians and other clinicians? What goes through your mind in how to structure that and what they need to see? And then how is that the same as what patients need to see or different?
I think they're definitely different what a clinician would need to see in a patient. From a clinician's perspective, I think it's really important to understand how a clinician is making decisions now, what information that they're using, what their pain points are, where they would need or want more information. And I think that has really influence some of the design and what we build. And particularly, I'll give you one example, one of our early project where we collected about a year of data from individuals with schizophrenia, and we had all kinds of measurements, right? And when we met with the clinicians, we're like, wouldn't you like to see all this data? And they're like, no, please don't show me all the data because
Hmm.
I'm already overwhelmed. And understanding where we kind of distill that what information is key for care, right? It's my patient is trending towards relapse or the medication isn't working, right? Those kind of really change point and significant change points are important so that they can be proactive or they can know when something is not working. And that level of design and what's needed comes from understanding what the process is now, understanding that what technology can provide and what is a good intersection. So I think that has always informed the work that we do, is how do you take all this vast amount of information and what do you need to distill? And I'll give a concrete example. In mental health, we looked at just doing some assessment. PHQ-9 is a mental health assessment tool. So this is already happening. People are capturing that information. Do we need to automatically predict PHQ? Maybe. It might be great, but we've also seen that these types of measurement are so diverse and across different individuals, manifest in different ways. It is much harder to predict accurately someone's PHQ score using sensors than actually to predict changes, right? I can say someone's mental health or PHQ level is significantly deteriorating or improving. That information is a really good intersection with what clinicians can use and what technology can robustly provide. And I think that is what we need to do more, that not always say, I want to get the best, most precision prediction of a score, but really understand how that information can be used in a clinically meaningful way.
So I'm always a little puzzled by the fact that we want to build things that will estimate what we can get directly by asking our patients, right? You talked about the PHQ-9, and I like the point that you made about being better able to predict change or focusing on change, because I can ask someone how depressed they are. So I really think that's an important point that you make. Did you find when you started collecting these kinds of data with people with schizophrenia or other serious mental illness, was it a struggle to convince people that this was worth doing? Did people want to wear these devices or use these devices?
I think one of the things that was very important in the work that we did and really helped us move the research and technology forward was not only meeting clinicians who might act on this information, but also the patients. So I think early on, understanding where the patients are struggling, what they need, and what their concerns are was just as important. So when we did this work, we actually went and in a clinical setting, met with individuals with schizophrenia. And one of the things that we realized, something like serious mental illness, which is a lifelong illness, individuals are trying to live in the real world and kind of manage their symptoms and have a better quality of life. And really figuring out how the technology and measurement can improve their life was very important, right? It could be just identifying someone over time, their symptoms are flaring up, and maybe they need some attention. It could be suggesting some simple change in their behavior that could help them manage the symptoms. Or just a medication isn't working because of their symptoms or the effect is wearing off. So I think understanding where the need is and designing technology that can support those needs has been very important. And I think then you really can design something that is acceptable and that isn't something where I think where people feel the most kind of resistance to, you give me data, I promise something good will happen in the future. And I think that is where we as technologists can do a better job. And I think sometimes as we do research and clinical trials, we are trying to kind of carve out a very clean experiment design and how we build things. And the challenge there is that once we show some effect there in the real world, some of it doesn't carry through because we are not really thinking about in the real world what would make a patient want to use these types of technology. How could it help them? So I think it's a challenging space to work on of how do you make a scientific claim and also make it useful. But I think that's something that we should do more of.
And it seems like one of the challenges in AI in general, at least as it relates to health, is that the engineers and the developers build things that they are excited about, and the clinicians and patients have things that they need, and they don't necessarily talk to each other, or at least they don't talk to each other until it's sort of too late, right? Until the thing is built. I'm curious, as someone who kind of has a foot in both worlds, how do we fix that? How do we get the engineers and the developers and the clinicians and the patients at the table early enough to really design things that will be useful to everybody?
So I think we are already getting there through our failures, right? So technologies have tried to be very disruptive and build things that they're excited about that haven't been adopted widely in healthcare. I think also from a clinical perspective, some of the solutions that use technology hasn't leveraged the best of technology to make it engaging, useful, non-burdensome to patients or clinicians. So I think the landscape is changing, but I would frame it in a way that before technologists had a hammer in search of a nail, and over time, clinicians and technologists started working together more, where we got better at finding the right tool for the right problem or right hammer for the right nail. But I think in this case where we have a big need in clinical care and this really rapid innovation in technology and I think if we come together early on and really build solutions and co-design solutions together, we can invent new tools altogether to better target the problem that we care about and understand the kind of pain points and individual preferences and limitations. So I do think that we need more early interaction and co-designing than kind of even matching the tool with the problem.
Are we there? Do you think that happens routinely now, or do you still see that people build and then ask?
Yeah, I don't think that happens routinely. And I do think people build and ask. And that kind of gets back to a bigger problem as we kind of function in this space as researchers and as entrepreneurs or as clinicians. I think sometimes we stay in our own community. Even if we think about research between a technologist and researcher, clinical researcher, how do you take that research into the real world? When you are an entrepreneur, how do you kind of think about the most evidence-based solution and still build a technology that can be profitable in the timeline that you need to be profitable, right? So one of the biggest problems I see that there are gaps between communities that are working on solutions. Researchers and clinicians are working on looking at futuristic solutions. We have implementation scientists who are thinking about how do you take solutions and implement it into a care setting. And then we have entrepreneurs who are trying to think about how new solutions can be really productized and serve a specific business need or clinical need. But I do think that those gaps are also almost valleys of death, which we see that we assume that the bridges will be built. And I think we think about pure research and applied research. When we talk about applied research, we need to have some kind of teeth to really say, what does it mean to kind of carry it forward? And I do think now with the tools being where they are and technology being where they are and the real clinical need, I think that there are opportunities to more easily blend those together. I think before it was harder to take the latest technology and deploy it in a clinical context, but now we often have the AI tools, we have the infrastructure where it's much easier to take a new idea and test it out in the real world. And I think we need to have more support and process to really quickly take research into the real world and test it and reevaluate it and redesign and iterate.
So wearing my JAMA hat, I know that's a huge priority for us is understanding, the technology is great and show me that it works in the real world and show me that it works in the real world in the ways that we in medicine are accustomed to seeing. So whether it's a randomized trial or a big sort of naturalistic study or something, like collect some data and show me that this actually changes outcomes. Speaking of which, in 2021, you sort of stepped sideways from academia to join Optum Labs. And you've alluded a few times to the fact that there are people who come at this from all different perspectives, right? I'm really curious about what you noticed and what it was like to go from a more traditional academic role to a place where I assume it was more about real world deliverables. So what was it like going from academia to a place like Optum Labs?
It was a fascinating experience and I learned a lot. And I think one of the things as a researcher that I never thought about or learned about as much is the payment side of healthcare, the scale of healthcare delivery and the needs, right? I've worked with a lot of clinicians and in clinical research and doing kind of randomized controlled trials. But one of the things that was always a little bit fuzzy to me as from a researcher, I also kind of was involved in a startup, is what does it take to take a solution that we clearly know has some benefit, has some clinical use, and be able to scale it in a way that will have wide scale adoption and is going to be also affordable. And I think that is something that is really important, at least in US healthcare, is the understanding of like, how do you reduce the tension that right now we have between a patient doctor interaction and a health system or financial side, and even with the patient and the clinicians, right? And how do we design solutions that can potentially bring them together? And I think that was really an important experience for me in kind of thinking about what are the ways where we can bring solutions that really reduce that tension and can be acceptable for all the stakeholders in healthcare. I was kind of interested in thinking about mental health, a topic that I've done a lot of research and care about. I had been involved in a startup that is taking kind of some of the research out into the real world in terms of product. But thinking about digital biomarkers, how can it be useful, right? Thinking about the context of where this could be useful. And one of the things that has shaped, based on the experience that I've had within United, was there are big needs in primary care in understanding and supporting mental health. It is a place where there is an infrastructure and also potential reimbursement models that can support integration of mental health. And we already know that this is having a huge impact in terms of people's outcome, both in mental health and physical health. Someone with depression and diabetes will have worse outcome longitudinally than someone with just diabetes alone, and someone they will cost more. So I think thinking about how there's already a clinical model, collaborative care that supports that, how can technology amplify that and scale it and make it more accessible and make it cheaper? So I think understanding how these things come together has shaped the way I think about research solutions now as well. So I think it's very valuable to learn things from different perspectives.
So with those perspectives, I feel like we build a lot of these technologies that everyone agrees should exist, right? It's extremely helpful, presumably, to be able to track someone's status over time and help them track their status. But the problem always becomes who's going to pay for it, right? We all want, everyone sitting at the table says there should be a thing that makes it easier to track these symptoms over time. But then when it comes to who's going to pay for the device or the monitoring or whatever, everybody takes two steps back. Did your time at Optum shift sort of how you think about that? Or what do you think the answer is for that kind of a problem?
I think there is new ways people are paying for healthcare, right? If you think about just wearable sensors, right, we've seen a huge change and growth in remote patient monitoring and reimbursement for remote patient monitoring. We are seeing remote therapeutic monitoring that can help in therapeutic intervention. So I do think that there are new types of reimbursement models that are coming into play. I think from a technology perspective, as technologists, we are not often aware or get involved in showing the potential of technology and how it could support the needs, but also reduce the cost without compromising outcomes. So I do think that there is more involvement from all sides that is needed. We need to be more involved in thinking about the whole picture, and particularly I would say from a research side, we build that innovative solution and then sometimes assume the other people will figure out the rest. And I think we're realizing we can't do that. We can't do it when it comes from ethics. We can't do that in terms of thinking about the privacy issues. We can't take that stance also when we think about payment and reimbursement and how much it's going to cost. And I also think that the entrepreneurial side, we often start with a big innovative vision and then fall back into the standard models of reimbursement or models of care just to be financially sustainable and the return on investment from some of the investment that's needed to grow a startup. So I do think that as we think about investment and financing of innovative solutions and also research, what are ways where we can move the field forward as a whole, as a collective community, and bring people together, and what type of funding model is needed, right? We have pure research funding, we have investor funding, we have philanthropic funding. And I think one of the things that where we can collectively do forward is really kind of bridge and create glues to carry the innovation forward into practice and really support that growth. Right now, often we have these islands of growth and things in between fall through the cracks. A lot of money is spent through NIH to do clinical research. How do we take it forward? And we are seeing more and more efforts towards trying to get that forward, right? And I think we need more.
I want to thank Dr. Tanzeem Choudhury for speaking with us today. I'm Dr. Roy Perlis, and this is JAMA AI Conversations. To follow this and other JAMA Network podcasts, please visit us online at jamanetworkaudio.com or search for JAMA Network wherever you get your podcasts. This episode was produced by Daniel Morrow at the JAMA Network. Thanks for listening.
This content is protected by copyright by the American Medical Association with all rights reserved, including those for text and data mining, AI training, and similar technologies.